So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this session of the book club. I'm sorry we're a few minutes late today because there has been some trouble logging in and all that. So please forgive us and onward bound. Now, we have been having sessions every Sunday since the lockdown happened last March. And it's been great because every Sunday we have had a volunteer to talk about a significant book. And so this is the 86th session since the lockdown started. And yeah, I think it is pretty great. So this time, I think we have the youngest speaker we have ever had until now. So we have 14-year-old Anika Madura Peruma talking to us from New York. And she has chosen a book which is can be classified as a dystopian novel, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Now, along with 1984 and Brave New World and all those dystopian novels, this also gives a vision of what the future could be like. So Anika, we'd like to hear what you have to say about this book. Over to you.
Yeah, let me just show my presentation. Okay, can everybody see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is going to be the book I'll be talking about. So let's talk about the author a little first. So Ray Bradbury is a prolific American writer. He kind of set the stage for a new era of science fiction. He was born in 1920 and he died in 2012 at 91 years old. And he is best known for his short stories, science or speculative fiction, and screenplays. So his most famous book is Fahrenheit 451, which we're going to be talking about. So his career kind of started off during World War II because he wasn't drafted as he had poor eyesight. So he started to write for science fiction magazines and started to get his short stories published. And in 1951, he was able to publish his first set of short stories. These had a kind of a theme of like heartless technology against human psychology. And this would be like a reoccurring idea in a lot of his novels, and including Fahrenheit 451. So since Fahrenheit 451 is a comment kind of on what is happening in America at the time, post-World War II, during the Cold War, just a little bit of historical context around what is happening at the time. So in America, there was this major fear of communism and of communists in general. And Senator McCarthy of Wisconsin kind of saw this fear and realized he could manipulate it to serve his own interests. And so with his political sway and with the help of FBI director at the time, FBI director at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, he was able to falsely and without evidence accuse people of being communists. And he specifically targeted groups that were like different from the normal in that context. Like, as in, they had different beliefs than like the typical nuclear family, which was also being promoted at the time. So he would target groups such as the LGBTQ community and Hollywood writers, liberals, activists, any community that was in some sense a minority in America. He was able to target and basically fire them from their jobs and stop them from being hired again. And this, coupled with a wave of propaganda around the idea of the nuclear family, or like the perfect suburban family with a mom and a dad and 2 kids and a dog, kind of was able to bring a lot of fear around minority groups in a completely untrue light. So the next part of historical context I want to talk about is the household television. And during the 1950s, from 1949 to 1969, the number of households in the US with at least one TV set rose from less than 1 million to 44 million. You can see I have a graph here kind of showing this insanely steep upward slope, because the household TV became basically a part of any American's life. And this plays a huge role in Fahrenheit 451, as Ray Bradbury talks a lot about TV and mass media, which is basically what the television did. Everybody had one. So I also would like to briefly talk about the Kennedy-Nixon debate. The Kennedy-Nixon debate actually happened in 1960, so it was after Fahrenheit 451 was published, but because of Ray Bradbury's amazing foreshadowing skills, there's a little bit of what happens here reflected in the book, which I think is really interesting, which we'll talk about later. But basically what happened in the Kennedy-Nixon debate was that Nixon was far more qualified than Kennedy in terms of political experience. He had 8 years as the country's second in command to Kennedy's 1 term in Senate. So before the debate, Nixon had a slim lead. But a couple weeks before the debate, Nixon suffered a knee injury, got an infection, and had the flu, all within a couple of weeks, while Kennedy was well rested and was younger than Nixon in the first place. And in most people's opinion, was a little bit better looking. So when this debate came live, they were pretty much matched in preparedness, but Nixon was looking decidedly more sickly and tired during the debate. And while radio listeners called the debate a draw, the first debate, or named Nixon the victor, the 70 million TV viewers voted for Kennedy in an insane margin. And so this kind of just shows that by televising the debate, this is the first televised debate ever, people were able to see how much their public image and how much they just looked, rather than how prepared they were, played an enormous part in who was elected. So let's actually start talking about the book. So we start this book with Guy Montag, the main character. He is a firefighter. He's a firefighter, but in this dystopian future of America, firefighters start fires and burn books, which are outlawed, rather than stop fires. So it's separated into 3 parts, and I'll walk you through each part: the hearth and the salamander, the sieve and the sand, and burning bright. Fahrenheit tells the story of Montag's slow realization of the horrifying reality that he lives in. So we start this book with Montag walking home from work, where he meets Clarice. And Clarice is this young girl, and she is so different from Montag and the rest of society. She asks questions that nobody else asks, such as, she asks Montag whether he's happy, and Montag doesn't even know. And she asks Montag questions such as, were houses always fireproof? And to us, that is such an obvious answer that of course not, but Montag doesn't know because they don't know their own history. And this interaction, which is so different from his normal, haunts Montag when he gets home. And he's kind of in like, his whole world has been tilted because of this. And then when he gets home, we also meet Mildred, his wife. And we realize when we meet her that she is overdosed on sleeping pills, and Montag also realizes this. And so he calls the hospital, and a machine is brought to revive her. And this machine has been made purposely for reviving people that have overdosed. And Montag and us as the readers start to realize how commonplace this occurrence has been. And this is our first hint into one of the themes of this book, of the normalization of death and suicide specifically, which I'll continue to point out as we move through this book. We also learn of an ongoing and upcoming war that is taking place as bombers fly over the house during this scene. So the next morning, we get more of an introduction to Mildred and Montag's relationship and the TV walls, or Mildred's family. So Mildred and Montag's relationship is utterly lacking in connection even. They feel no bond towards each other, not even like friendship bond. There is no love between each other. And Mildred comes to be some sort of a representation of society and is like the kind of normal person in society. She feels no connection to Montag, and neither of them have any love for each other. We also are introduced to TV walls, or Mildred's family. And basically what this is, it is a room where in their house, 3 walls are like floor to ceiling TVs, just a whole wall is a TV. And there are tons of shows and things Mildred can watch on it, and she refers to them as if as if it were her family, and she is closer to them than she is to Montag, which is very telling of their relationship in the first part. So as the book continues, Montag becomes closer with Clarisse, and they have multiple conversations about like various taboo topics, whether it be like love and relationships, or the normalization of like death in childhood, and the normalization of not learning anything, and how school has become not a way for you to learn, but a way for you to get stimulation, but not anything meaningful. And so Clarisse starts to become a necessity in Montag's routine. He talks to her basically every day. And meanwhile, at Montag's job, we are introduced to the mechanical hound, who is a robot creature at the firehouse in the shape of a spider, very confusingly, given that it's a hound, which is a killing machine, is deadly, but we don't really know yet why it's there, what its purpose is. Montag is very scared of it. We are also introduced to Beatty, the firehouse captain. He's kind of an authority figure. He's Montag's superior, and at first glance, he seems like your kind of average fire captain, but as the course of the book goes on, we're going to get a lot more depth from him. And then as soon as Clarisse has become this like necessity in Montag's routine, she disappears. He is walking home, he's looking for her for their normal talk that they have, and she's just not there, and she doesn't show up for multiple days. So Montag's kind of like, oh my gosh, what's happened? Because Clarisse has become such an integral part of him and what he does. And then we finally get a scene of the firemen having to burn down a building. So they're sitting at the firehouse, the fire bell rings, and they go to answer a call. And what this call means is basically somebody has reported that they found books in somebody else's house, and they're going to burn that house down. So they get to this house, and the woman whose house it is won't leave. And that just to start it off is really discomforting for all these firemen, and it makes them feel really guilty and uncomfortable because they're so used to everybody obeying them. They're so used to being superior and authoritative. They always feel disconnected from what they're doing because there are no people around. They're only burning inanimate objects. And so for this woman to be there while they're dousing the house in kerosene is really disconcerting to them. And so that's the first notice that you get that something's wrong. And then Montag steals a book. And we kind of see Clarisse's influence here, as it is described as his white hand, and Clarisse is always described as white. And we kind of see how Montag has been changed by Clarisse. We see how his character is developing. He started to question things. And so he steals a book. Books are outlawed. He is not supposed to have books, but he steals one anyway. And then the firemen are trying to burn down the house, so they need to get the woman to leave. And finally, the woman pulls out a match, and frightened because the house is completely doused in kerosene, they leave the house, and the woman drops the match and the house burns. It goes up in flames, and she literally commits suicide because she would rather not leave her house and her books. And this sparks a ton of emotions for Montag, and he goes home and he's like, oh my gosh, what is my job? Like, am I actually doing this to people? And he goes home and he's trying to engage in conversation with Mildred, and it comes up that Clarisse is dead. And it is said in such an and Mildred tells him this, and it is said in such an anticlimactic way that Montag this just only causes more turmoil for Montag, because Mildred said it happened 4 days ago, but she forgot because death is so normalized and it's such a small occurrence in her life. And Montag is kind of just reeling from the fact that this person that he put on a pedestal as knowing more and being smarter and actually understanding things has just died in such a meaningless way as like a car accident. And so the next day, Montag feels sick, and it's not really a physical sickness. It's kind of this mental sickness because of the overwhelming thoughts and emotions that he doesn't know how to deal with. He's only really dealt with emotions and thoughts of fire, burn, and like comfortableness. It hasn't even been happiness, but so to have all these different emotions is really concerning to him, and it causes him to kind of feel mentally sick. And so, so Beatty, the fire captain, comes over kind of to like pep talk Montag in a way, and tries to explain like how the firemen came to be and like why the world is like that. And we get this whole description of mass media. And this is again tying into our historical context and how mass media leads to speed, like speed in society, and everybody moving faster and needing things to happen faster, which in turn leads to destroying of unnecessary thought. Like if we cannot sit and think with like just sit with our thoughts, we have to continue to get stimulation. We destroy what is called unnecessary thought, or like meaningful conversations in some way. And Beatty tries to push this narrative that everybody wanted to be made equal, and like everybody by like society, and society wants to be happy, and that the only way to do that was to get rid of things which people have an opinion on. And so one of these included things was books, because a good book means that there's going to be an opinion in it, there's going to be a message in it, and there's never going to be a book where everybody agrees with a certain message. And therefore books were outlawed. He also kind of drops this thing that the government had a role in Clarice's death. And it kind of puts it all in perspective to Montag that there are hundreds of Clarices over the world, or in America itself. And though she was different, she was not special. And I think this makes Montag kind of scared a little bit, because he's like, I thought I was doing something different, but like Clarice wasn't even able to do it. How am I going to be able to do it? And so once Beatty leaves, Montag shows Mildred and the reader the many books he has been illegally hiding. We saw him steal one book, but it happens that he has around 20-ish books that he's been hiding. And so that's how the first part ends. So moving on to the second part, the sieve and the stand. It opens with Mildred and Montag trying to talk to Mildred and read to Mildred about his like confused and like different thoughts. And after failing, he contacts an acquaintance of his, his name is Faber, and he's a retired English professor. So then we get this scene on the subway where Montag is going to Faber's, and there's this incessant ad playing, which continues over and over again, called Denham's Dentifrice. And it continues and continues and continues. And Montag has brought a book on the subway, which is its own dangerous thing in itself. But he's brought a book on the subway and he's trying to read it. And there's this whole battle that we see play out basically in his mind between numbing himself to this incessant stimulation or sitting with his thoughts and reading, which is hard. And he's really trying to it. And this is kind of an example of the sieve and the sand. He's trying to get these thoughts to stay, but they keep on sifting through the sieve. So then he meets with Faber, and Faber kind of gives his own explanation of how society needs to be fixed, and they are able to hatch a plan. So Faber's understanding of society is what it needs is quality of information. So not just books, but books that have opinions and books that have thoughts, time to digest it. So the ability and the time to be able to sit with those thoughts and understand them completely. And then the ability to act upon what a person learns. So once you have formulated an opinion on what you've read, the ability to make changes about your life or other people's life based on what you have learned. And so they hatched this plan to plant books in firemen's houses so that they are destroyed, and therefore will plant seeds of suspicion, thus destroying the system from within. So this is the plan they hatch, and Montag goes home to find Mildred's two other friends are over with her. And so we get a little peek. So we've heard a lot about how society has came to be. So now we get a little peek into the utter like disarray that it actually is. And so when we first see this TV show that they're watching with each other, and it's called The White Clown. And basically what happens is multiple white clowns come on screen and they start chopping off each other's limbs. And Mildred and the friends love it. It's their favorite show. They laugh, they clap. And it is scary because Montag and us as the reader are seeing this and we're like, this is horrifying, and they're loving it. And it's this kind of numbness to the graphicness of this and to the gore of this that they're just missing, like this piece of their brain that is just not functioning, and it's kind of scary. And so then Montag is kind of really like this really scares Montag, and he switches off the TV and he's like, we have to talk about this. We should talk. And so they're a little confused at first because they're not used to talking. And so, but they start talking and they talk about war and relationships and children are their three first main talking points. And those could be such great talking points. But what do they talk about? They talk about their children as if they were chores. And there's a quote along the lines of one of the women saying, oh yeah, it's just like doing the laundry that they're taking care of their children as. And it's just this horribleness of this disattachment, like detachment from actual real life that they have. They talk about their relationships. One person is on their third marriage and they said, oh yeah, when my partner dies in the war, I'm not going to mourn him. We've both decided we're not going to mourn each other when we die, and I'm not going to be sad anyway. And it's this horribleness of their entire numbness to any emotion at all. Lastly, they talk about elections, and this is actually a really interesting part of the book, and it kind of relates back to the Kennedy-Nixon debate that I was talking about earlier. They're talking about who they voted for, and there are two people you can vote for. Victor Noble, I think, is one of the names, and Hubert Hogue. And Mr. Noble is from the Ins party, and Hubert Hogue is from the Outs party. And Noble is supposed to be very good looking, while Hubert Hogue is supposed to be ugly. And it's this whole, and obviously Noble wins. And they all voted for Noble because they're basically, their logic is, who wouldn't want a good looking president, basically. And this one, Ray Bradbury, basically guessed the future, which is one, insane within itself. And two, you could see the shallowness to their decisions. They don't know anything beyond what it looks like because of all their time they spent with TV, and they don't know what knowledge is, because when could they ever have learned knowledge when they're constantly being fed stimulation? And so, just as the reader is, Montag is kind of infuriated by this nothingness that they're talking about and attempts this grand display to show them. And Faber, who is in this Bluetooth-esque earpiece that Montag has, they're connected by a Bluetooth earpiece. It's kind of like a phone call, but really tiny. And Faber tries to stop him, and Montag's having none of it. And this ends with them reading a poem called Dover Beach. And so I'm not going to read this entire poem right now, but basically the idea, this poem is really, really important to the plot. And it's kind of this idea that it's like the gradual demise of society is what Matthew Arnold is talking about. And that kind of matches with Fahrenheit 451 in its of itself, but it's kind of the idea that people are losing touch with nature a little bit, which is also happening in Fahrenheit 451, and it really matches. But this poem really destabilizes Mildred's friends, and they've never really had to deal with something that they don't understand in the first 3 seconds of hearing it. And they kind of all leave crying and scared in a way. And this leads Montag to feel really guilty. And Mildred and Faber kind of condemn his actions, Faber for almost ruining the plan, and Mildred for scaring her friends away. So Montag is feeling really guilty. And then he discovers that Mildred has been destroying his books one by one. So he rehides them. And then Montag goes to the firehouse as part of the plan and gives the book back to Beatty. And there's this really uncomfortable scene where Montag is feeling really guilty and Beatty is like kind of provoking him. And then the fire bell rings and Montag, Beatty, and the rest of the firemen answer it. And they end up at Montag's house. And so great cliffhanger, but that is only the end of section 2. So moving on to section 3, Burning Bright. So Montag learns this call was made by Mildred, and this is actually really horrifying to him because Mildred is his wife, and as much as they don't have what we would call like a good marriage in our day and age, Montag still relies on Mildred. She was the first person he showed the books to, and for him to betray him like that is really scary. And he learns that he is to burn down his own house, and then he will be arrested afterwards. So Montag is going to burn down his house. He's feeling all these big emotions, and Beatty starts to provoke Montag, or does he? We'll get to talk a little bit about this later. And Montag ends up killing Beatty with the flamethrower. This also destroys Montag and Faber's Bluetooth connection. So Montag has just killed Beatty with the flamethrower, and he is not connected with Faber anymore. And just as all of this happens, the mechanical hound appears and attacks Montag, but doesn't kill him. This is actually crazy important in the book because we have heard this entire book that the mechanical hound is this killing machine. It never fails. And it just attacked Montag and technically failed. And so Montag is running away and he tries to convince himself, rightfully so, maybe not, that Beatty wanted to die. And so he's running away because the government and police and firemen, that whole collective of authority figures, are searching for Montag. And he has his books with him. And through his Bluetooth radio, to be distinguished from his Bluetooth connection, he hears that a war has begun. And so, but this is not a big thing in his life, to be honest, because in this society, wars were constantly happening. So he continues his plan by planting a book in the fireman's house. And then he gets to Faber's house. And so Faber welcomes him in, and they watch TV and they discover, and this the hunt for Montag is being televised. And they discovered that the mechanical hound is searching for Montag. So Montag covers his scent and continues to escape. So because everybody's watching the television search for Montag, he escapes by floating away on a river. And this kind of causes him to start thinking more than he ever has. Like, he's gotten really close to understanding, but he's never really had time to like sit with his thoughts. And this like overwhelming nature and not being around like the man-made and technology kind of allows him to do this. And so he's really thinking is all these deep thoughts about fire and time and why the world is like this. And so finally he gets off the river and he follows these old railroad tracks and he finds a group of men sitting around a fire, their leader being called Granger. And so the men welcome Montag, and together they watch the chase continue. And in the end, an innocent man who is not Montag is killed by the mechanical hound, and Montag is pronounced dead. And we are going to talk, I'm going to leave this kind of open-ended about why this happened, so we can talk about this a little more when we get to the discussion portion. So we and Montag learned that the group of men are all rebels, and the way that they are seeking to change society is that they retain books and their stories in their memories, and it's going to be passed down like word of mouth, like how it was hundreds of thousands of years ago. So Montag joins this group of men, and they continue to walk together towards the city. But bomber jets start to fly over them because, as I said, a war was starting, and Montag worries for Mildred, who is still there. Granger kind of seeks to reassure him by telling the story of his grandfather, the moral being that people are remembered and loved for their actions and what they leave behind. This both ties into their whole kind of philosophy about life and how they're going about changing the world. as their themselves are valued for the books they can remember and not the actual person. So it's a really interesting parallel a little bit. And so the bombs destroy the city and Montag clings to the earth and he pictures Mildred's last moments. And this is a really sad scene because we get to see Mildred die and she's looking into the mirror and she's not seeing herself. And then suddenly, right before the bomb explodes, she like finally like understands a little bit, and there's this realization before she dies, and Montag is completely heartbroken because of what he imagines. And the fact that he clung to the earth is also important. It's kind of showing how how nature has really helped him think, like how we saw in the river as well. So yeah, so after the bombs destroy their city, Granger kind of alludes their situation to a phoenix, albeit a smarter one. While both phoenixes and Granger and these rebels rise from the ashes, unlike the phoenix, they remember what happened before, and it's kind of this closing statement that yes, everything has been destroyed, but we know what went wrong, so we can fix it. And so the group of men and Granger and Montag continue on to the city to kind of rebuild from the ashes. So that's kind of it for my presentation. I have some themes and questions that we can talk about as a group as well. Like there are a couple things that are more about characters and about the book, like did Beatty want to die, and why did the mechanical hound kill someone who is not Montag? Who is the villain in this story, I think is a really interesting question. And so yeah, should I stop sharing now?
Or maybe continue to share that page, but maybe it's time for people to chime in.
Yeah, of course. If anybody has something they want to share, any questions they want to ask, would be a great time for that.
Anika, I'm just starting my video so you can, now you can see me. That was very good, Anika. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And you know, I read this book a long time ago. So you really helped me to remember it well. That bit about watching the chase, watching the chase for Montag, and someone who is not Montag being killed, and it being announced that Montag has been killed. So when in the novel, when they say that they knew that the attention span of people is not so very long. So that horrible realization that comes to the reader, that this is all entertainment. It's a form of entertainment. I mean, this is someone's life, for God's sake, but it's entertainment. It's like the Iraq war, started at 7:30 prime time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of that sort. And I was just thinking, and I remember a similar situation in another novel, by the way, and I think it is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, in which this so-called wrongdoer is being chased, and then they can't find him, or they lose track of him, so they just chase any old person that they find, some poor innocent guy, and he's supposed to be the person that they were chasing, because they have to report a success. They are successful in finding the wrongdoer. So that was so awful, to realize.
Yeah, it's like they have to show their authority. They have to show that they are still in control, and they also need to keep people invested. They need to make sure that people because we come to realize over the course of this book that the mechanical hound is not as good as killing that we think it is. It's really just something scary and intimidating to keep people in their place. And all of this chase, Montag's just one rebel. And so what can you really do? And they feel like it's not that important. It's more important to maintain this sense, even if it's fake, sense of control.
Exactly. Yes, indeed. And that is the scary thing, because you don't want the government to control you. And that's what they're doing. That is what they're doing. And that's what they want to do. Okay, so Mr. Balachandran has raised his hand. So would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I want to ask a little bit about the background to this book. It was written maybe immediately after the war, and that was a time when Norman Mailer wrote The Naked and the Dead. This whole scene of theater of the absurd came about, all immediately post-war. So is there something about the war which generated all this?
Yeah, so some like definitely Fahrenheit 451. It's a lot of it is based not specifically on the war, but on the Cold War and what happened right after World War II in America. So there's a lot of parallels to the propaganda and the manipulation of facts that like the McCarthyism is like a term for what Senator McCarthy did to like manipulate facts to accuse people of communism. And so there's the same manipulation of ideas that happens in Fahrenheit 451. And it's basically meant to be a comment on Cold War America and how if Senator McCarthy doesn't get his repercussions, this is what our world will look like.
Yes, McCarthy is very important, isn't he? And
Yeah.
And a scary chapter in history, really. Where he was trying to lead things to go. Okay, Anika, I would like to ask everyone this question. Who is the villain in this story? And let everyone weigh in. I think
Yeah.
very central question that we need to look at. So folks, I can't see everybody.
I think, Anika, screen sharing, can you shut it off, please? Please shut it off, yes, that's it. So we can see everyone. And everyone open it out and...
Please switch on your videos, folks, and your audios. And the question that we are seeking to answer now is, who is the villain in this novel? Latika, I'm sorry, I need it.
Latika?
Latika is on.
Well, actually, no, I have not gone. You know, I'm afraid I logged on so late, nearly 20 minutes late, I just couldn't get the connection. So I think I've lost quite a lot of the narrative, you know.
Okay.
All I wish to say is not regarding the villain, but from the little I've heard, there is a story, but there is an idea as far as I understood. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because between my laptop and my mobile, I didn't know what I was listening to. That this is something against ideas which books have and which books contain. And it is that which needs to be controlled and then destroyed. That is how you control people. Would that be the, behind the story, would that be the bigger idea?
Yeah, that's very correct. Like basically what the firemen are trying, like it's not the books themselves, it's the thoughts that they provoke. And like, but you by saying that it's like, it's the thoughts in the books, that's exactly what they're trying to stop. They don't really care about the fact that it's a book or whatever. They're just trying to stop people from having opinions in a way.
Exactly. Yes.
It is basically to manipulate thinking. If you remove anything that is thinking, you just want to remove it away from there. Once you remove, yes, you're more.
You can be controlled. Yes. Mukul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Anika, I wanted to ask you, at such a young age, what made you select this book for reviewing?
I actually read it for school. So I had read it at the beginning of this school year. So it was fresh in my mind. I liked the book. We had some good discussions on it. And since I'd gotten some like other people input just from discussing it in class, I felt probably one of the ones I'm most prepared to write, to like talk about.
Okay, that's very honest. Yeah, thank you.
Hina, you're very quiet.
Well, Satish, I'm making notes because I am supposed to be reviewing it.
Yes.
And I just have finished part 1.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just listening to what everybody's saying.
Okay. I thought Captain Beatty is an interesting guy. Now, he's the leader, right? He's the leader of the firefighters. So it seems to be sort of a sort of obvious thing to see him as the villain, but he's so well read. So
Yeah.
Obviously, he's much more than what he appears to be. And we're told that he provokes Montag to the extent of making him kill him. And it's like a suicide, isn't it, again?
Yeah.
Yeah, would you like to comment on Captain Beatty?
Yeah, I think I think he's definitely, he plays a villain's role, but it's really interesting to try to understand how much it's him and how much it's just like somebody above him, like kind of using him as a puppet, because that's what a lot of people in like this society are. Like Mildred is kind of this puppet of just the normal person in Fahrenheit 451 society. So I think as much as he is the villain, he also is more than just your average fireman captain who just wants to burn houses. Like he obviously has thoughts and he has ideas about society, but somebody has been able to tell him that even though these ideas, which to us sound horrible and we think, oh, we shouldn't be burning houses, to him, he's been able to think about it as, oh, these sound horrible, we should burn houses. So while I think he's definitely one of the villains, if not the villain, he has more depths than just being the villain. He's like what Montag could have been, but didn't.
Exactly. Yes, yes. But he hasn't had the courage to act upon some thoughts that he would probably have had. I mean, he's bound to have opinions, right? And bound to be chaffing against this controlling government, but he hasn't had the courage to do anything about it. It's like he's trapped in his role and continues to play his role as the fireman.
Yeah, and courage is a big thing for Montag, because Montag, as much as he struggles with all these emotions, he's kind of, if somewhat recklessly, sharing these half-baked thoughts with the world. And as much as it's half reckless, it's also very brave of him to be able to be like, I thought differently and I'm going to say my different thoughts. And while Beatty does that in the safety of Montag and in the guise of provoking him, he is less brave. And whether this is a means of protecting his own life or just because he is less brave is like definitely an interesting, like definitely something like I can't even say.
Wispy,
Yes.
would you like to say something?
Yeah, yes. I think it's not really necessary to look for villains, because I think the whole intention what Bradbury seems to have in writing this is to show the dehumanization of the individual. So I know we've been talking about the importance of ideas, which are of course important, but also the lack of emotion, because emotion also, makes us human. And I think this is a sort of awakening that we see in Montag. So I think the whole focus has been on showing the horrors of dehumanizing us, which of course is the control factor that the government is being held responsible. So we've been talking about ideas, I thought emotions also, and I think that's why Dover Beach came in, Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. There was a reference to that, Anika said, and that's a very, very sensitive poem, isn't it? So I thought that also was something put in, obviously intentionally, by Bradbury. Just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that like the whole idea that they don't really have emotions, they don't feel like things when violence happens or bad things happen. It's a really interesting question of like why that could be, because there's hundreds of reasons. Like, is it this constant stimulation? Is it the fact that they don't have books? Like, there's so many different reasons. And I think that's another question I can pose to all of you guys, that like, why do you think they're so numb? Like, what makes it so that it happens like that?
I think it is easiest to follow what someone in power tells you to do. To oppose it becomes difficult because the person in power has the strength to push you down. So this is a constant factor that you see in all governances which are not purely democratic, that this happens. If you speak something even a little off the government thought, yes, you're marked. I think this happens all over the world. It's what happened, like Moini was talking about. It happened in the USA also. It happened in India also. It's happening in many parts of the world. Like now we're changed over from democracy now, moving slowly into what was in the 30s. Sorry, that's my personal thought on that. I wanted Kaveri to come in. Kaveri, where are you, Kaveri? You were there. Please come in and join in.
Yes, I'm very much here. I'm just so amazed at the depth and intellect of one so young. She's presented it so beautifully. Her vocabulary is astounding. Her ideas are so mature. Firstly, I'm just so impressed by her content. Congratulations, Anika.
Thank you.
And you know, for me, it's like it's a reflection of the times we are in.
Exactly.
Because you know, this kind of shutting out thoughts is what social media is doing very effectively. I mean, time for any deep thought or contemplation or analysis or interpretation is all lost because, you know, the lowest common denominator is dominating the airwaves, particularly Twitter and other things, and is controlling the narrative and is able to influence so many in our country in engaging in acts of mindless violence, hate, discrimination. So, you know, we are seeing Fahrenheit 451 version 2, or I don't know what version we'll call it right now, in our country, where social media is the equivalent of what television was perceived as over there. So it has taken over the mind space and it has completely influenced very, very large sections of our society. We can see what's happening in our own country.
I think Latika, please add to that.
Well, just a small comment. I agree with you. Just a small comment that it's sadly ironical that way back in the 19th century when Dover Beach was written by Matthew Arnold, that particular poem had a great deal of sadness and a great deal of, in my view, pessimism, you know, and loss of faith. And then so many years later, here comes a book, there may have been others, but we are now discussing Fahrenheit 451, which takes up the same theme. And then that theme, first articulated by Arnold and then by, then in Fahrenheit, is as relevant today. So, you know, in what way have we changed? Maybe we are the wrong people who are discussing. Maybe there are people who are full of optimism who could discuss too. I don't know. But all of us seem to look at it in a way where mankind is being shut down in order to get greater control. And then you rule better. You have high economies, and then you get re-elected.
I see Judy there. Judy, good to see you. Can you hear me, Judy? Judy, switch on the audio. Judy used to be a regular with us. She's come here for the first time. Anyone
also,
else?
You know, Dover Beach and this novel do express this faint, desperate sense of hope also. A little bit of hope, you know, desperately sort of. Maybe, you know, they're going to the city, they're going to rebuild it. These are different people. Things will be different now. And Arnold also, I mean, this is the post-Calvinian crisis where the Christian framework was crumbling. People didn't have that sense of togetherness or sense of community anymore, now that the Bible had been proved to be false. But there's that, you know, through personal relations, maybe, Arnold says, we can find
Two
some.
personal relations, yes, not as a whole, not the society as a whole.
But that's a beginning. It's something to hold on to. A desperate sense of hope.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
What about
please,
Nabil?
Sheena, please come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about
Yes.
two of the characters since I'm still reading the book. One of them is Beatty. So when I was reading about Beatty is so knowledgeable that I was wondering, does this guy have a stolen library of books in his house? Because nobody is going to check him, right? He's a chief. And about the Hound and why the Hound killed an innocent man and not Montag. So the Hound is a machine which is programmed. So I feel that somebody may have wanted to create mischief and programmed the Hound wrongly. This is what I feel.
Yeah. So on the point about Beatty, like that's the whole interesting thing. Like he quotes books throughout the book. He quotes different books, and he is obviously very knowledgeable. And like you kind of come to think about him as like an older Montag, or like a different possible version of Montag. And for sure, he has read books. For sure, he has stolen books. But for whatever reason, when his own fire captain, his own Beatty came to him, he was able to be like, yeah, we should still be firemen. And while Montag was like, no, firemen are bad and we should not be burning books, Beatty probably said something along the lines of, okay, I'll continue to obey. And this knowledge that he has is really interesting, because it's like these different versions of people. Like he's not an entirely bad, mindless character, but he's definitely decided to agree with the government and agree with burning of books because he feels like he has no other option. So I definitely believe, at least at some point, that he had a whole library of books and that he had his own Montag-esque experience, but he just decided to do something different at the end of it. And then about the mechanical hound, I like, to be honest, like the thing that confuses me the most is that the entire time the mechanical hound is said to be the machine that never fails. And so even for it to be programmed wrongly is kind of this like, how could this even happen? And I think what Aji, I guess, was saying about the mechanical hound is it was to ensure success and to keep people entertained, because in the end, this was all it was. It was not, let's catch Montag. Montag was just one meaningless rebel. They needed to make sure that they kept power and they ensured success. And that was more important to them than actually catching the right person.
I imagine that the Hound was being continuously programmed, So when they realized that they cannot catch Montag, they probably gave it instructions to catch somebody else, that's what I would presume. I mean, they're constantly monitoring and directing the Hound.
Ginny,
If I could
hi
just
there.
come in for a minute, Satish.
Who's this? Kaveri, please go ahead. And then
This-
Ginny will come in.
I think this was deliberate, killing somebody, innocent man, whatever, just to convince everybody that the rebel is dead. We've
Exactly.
achieved
Success. Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't matter who you kill, and the
Mission
rebel has got
successful.
away. Yeah, and you don't want the public to know that a rebel gets away. You want them to be
Correct.
And
Exactly.
I think we find that probably nowadays also.
Exactly, Miss
That
P.
something's been achieved when perhaps it hasn't, but we're happy, we're placid about it, So this is the
It's
way
exactly that what is happening here.
Yes, encounter killings by the police everywhere so that they notch up the numbers.
Not just that, but by making it difficult for one person, catch up a guy and beat him up or put him behind the bars, half a dozen others who are on the bottom line, borderline, which want to say something, keep quiet. And this
Yes,
is the
will
way.
think twice. They'll think twice. If this is going to be their fate, then maybe they'd better not. Like Captain Beatty probably decided that survival was more important than anything else.
Exactly.
I did. I mean, in spite of reading and then obviously everything that implies in this book, in spite of that, he decides that he's going to toe the line just to survive.
Okay. Sonal, Anika, before you say something, let me ask Ginny what she has to say about today's program.
Well, I was interested in the choice of the name Guy Montag, because Guy being just man, and Montag, it means Monday in German, and it's to Monday, sort of every day. I thought this was the everyman character in this book. And I wanted to ask Annika if in your discussions you identified any meaning in some of the other names of the characters.
We did not actually talk about the names almost at all, but like, I didn't even realize that Montag meant that. And I think it's a really good example because we even see in Beatty that like other people have been through the same thing. And I even maybe the name is somewhat hopeful that if any person or any man can do this, then like we can also kind of change the system or rebel against what we don't think is right. But like, I had not thought of that at all. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
I like that point, Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've set me thinking, do the other names have any significance?
But that's what the book, all this discussion is about. It sets you thinking, and that's what, Anika, I think that was the last question. I think you've done a very good job. I enjoyed listening to what you were saying. 3 cheers to you. And I don't know whether Mohini has told you about it, that we have something to say. I've kept it away. Anika is our granddaughter. and in the family, everyone reads except Ginny the dog. So everyone reads, and Anika has picked it up all the while. You'll see her with a book in the hand, and there's Kiran also there. He also loves to read. Okay, there he waves waving out to you. So the family is all a book reader's family. And a writer, author.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Okay, Mo, take it on from here.
Okay, so Anika, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Said you have been our youngest presenter so far, and you've done a mighty good job. As good as anyone else. So thank you so much. And this is an excellent book that you chose. It's all about books and stimulation and intellectuals and ideas and freedom and control. Very interesting ideas indeed. And you communicated it so well. You articulated it beautifully. It's been a very pleasant, interesting, rewarding session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
well done.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody else who has come, who has participated, who has questioned, who has commented and listened. So thank you very much.
And
congratulations, Anika. We are very proud of you.
Thank you.
Lovely presentation.
This is Anika's grandma. And
Sheena
also there. Nihal is also there.
So Sheena, you liked what I said, no? I confessed finally at the end of it. Okay, guys.
Okay, so let me just...
Before you close down more, let me apologize. Things went wrong. There have been some end of the year problem, holiday, someone must have gone and not given the correct book club
link.
Links properly. So apologies. Next time you'll find it will be done. I will be a little more careful to see what goes on. Okay. Instead, we'll do double checking to see everything is fine. Okay. Thank you. Mo, take away.
Yes. So let me just tell you what to expect in the next couple of Sundays. So on the 9th of January, we have Friana Munshi, also a young person, maybe not as young as Anika, but very young, one of my MA students. Friana Munshi is going to be dealing with a book called Anxious People by Frederick Backman. And on the 16th of January, since the speaker who was going to talk about the writings of Borges has said that he will not be able to do that, so I'm popping in with a book called The Midnight Library. So again, something to do with books. And if you remember, Sunita Shetty had led the discussion on the book called The Paris Library. And there again, the importance of books, was central. But I think it's only appropriate that the book club gives prominence to such books. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
More just a thing, the thought process that is the crowd is too little, but still I'll say, I was thinking that, I read somewhere that reading, writing helps keep various mental illnesses in control.
At bay.
At bay. So why don't we have someone to have, say, once a month or once in a quarter, writings from each one, short, saying, say, about 300 words or so, people can write a story, a poem or something like that. Let's think it up. If you guys have any ideas, please let us know. So we'll see how we can encourage people.
We can have a space on the website where people can post.
No, but I would like people to be able to talk about it, read it out and all that. It makes you feel much better that a story is read out or you read out your story. I would like to give people the credit for that. Let's think about it. And if you have, Sheena, Wispy, if you all have any ideas, please let us know. We'll see how we can take it up from there.
Sure.
Okay, guys. Moini, take over.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, and see you next Sunday.
And Anika, that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very well done. Very well done.